The morning sun was already hot when Denise Williams pulled off the highway and onto the two-lane road that led into Baxter County. She rolled down the window of her rental car and let the warm Georgia air fill the cabin. It smelled like pine trees and red clay, exactly the way she remembered from her childhood summers. She hadn't been back here in almost 3 years. Life had a way of getting busy, and the 12-hour drive from Virginia always felt longer than it should. But when her grandmother called last week and mentioned she was feeling lonely, Denise didn't think twice. She requested a few days off, packed a bag, and hit the road before sunrise. At 34 years old, Denise had lived more life than most people twice her age. She had joined the Marines right out of high school, back when everyone in her small neighborhood thought she was crazy. A young black woman from the projects joining the military? People shook their heads and whispered that she wouldn't last 6 months, but Denise had something those people didn't understand. She had fire in her bones and ice in her veins. She wasn't just looking for a paycheck or a way out. She wanted to prove something to herself. She wanted to know what she was made of. 12 years later, she had her answer. 3 combat deployments. Strength and conditioning medals. A reputation as one of the toughest hand-to-hand combat instructors in her entire battalion. She had trained young recruits who showed up scared and soft and turned them into soldiers who could handle anything. She had earned every stripe, every ribbon, and every ounce of respect that came with her service, but you wouldn't know any of that by looking at her today. She wore faded blue jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and white sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No uniform. No medals. No indication of the warrior underneath. That was the thing about people like Denise. The most dangerous ones never looked dangerous at all. The GPS on her phone told her she was about 20 minutes from her grandmother's house. But her stomach was growling, and she remembered there was a little grocery store in the next town where she could grab some supplies. Grandma Lucille always kept a clean house, but her refrigerator was usually empty except for sweet tea and leftover cornbread. Denise smiled at the thought. That woman had raised her during the summers when her mother was working double shifts. Grandma Lucille had taught her how to braid hair, how to make peach cobbler from scratch, and how to hold her head high no matter what the world threw at her. Those lessons had carried her through basic training, through war zones, through moments when giving up seemed like the only option. She owed that woman everything. The town of Ridley appeared around a bend in the road. It wasn't much to look at. A few blocks of old brick buildings, a gas station, a hardware store, and the small grocery market she remembered. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and strangers stuck out like a sore thumb. Denise pulled into the parking lot of Garrison's Family Grocery. There were maybe a dozen cars scattered around, mostly old trucks and sedans that had seen better days. She found a spot near the back and turned off the engine. Before getting out, she checked her phone. A text from her best friend back home asking if she'd arrived safely. A weather alert warning about thunderstorms later in the week. Nothing urgent. She dropped the phone into her purse and stepped out of the car. The heat hit her immediately, thick and heavy. Summer in Georgia was no joke. She could already feel sweat forming on the back of her neck. As she walked toward the store entrance, she noticed a police cruiser parked near the front. It was angled carelessly across 2 spaces, like whoever drove it couldn't be bothered to park properly. A white officer leaned against the hood, arms crossed, watching the parking lot like he owned it. Denise felt his eyes land on her the moment she came into view. She knew that feeling. Every black person in America knew that feeling. That sudden awareness of being watched, being tracked, being measured and judged before you even opened your mouth. She kept walking, her pace steady and unhurried. She had done nothing wrong. She had no reason to feel nervous. And yet, somewhere deep in her chest, a familiar tension began to build. The officer was young, maybe late 20s, with a buzz cut and a jawline that looked permanently clenched. His uniform was crisp, his badge was shiny, and his hand rested on his belt like he was ready for trouble. Denise reached the entrance and pulled open the glass door. The cool air conditioning washed over her like a blessing. She grabbed a basket and started walking through the aisles, picking up the essentials: bread, eggs, butter, a bag of apples because Grandma Lucille loved apples. Some chicken thighs for dinner. She moved through the store calmly, taking her time. A few other shoppers nodded politely as they passed. An older white woman with silver hair smiled at her near the produce section. A young mother struggled to keep her toddler from grabbing candy off the shelf. Normal small-town scenes. Nothing out of the ordinary, but when Denise reached the checkout line, she glanced through the front windows and saw that the officer had moved. He was no longer leaning against his cruiser. He was standing near her rental car looking at the license plate. Then looking back toward the store, her stomach tightened. She paid for her groceries with cash, thanked the teenage cashier, and picked up her bags. As she pushed through the door and stepped back into the heat, she saw the officer walking toward her with purpose in his stride. She didn't speed up. She didn't slow down. She just kept moving toward her car, groceries in hand, mind already running through possibilities. Maybe he just wants to ask a question. Maybe he's bored. Maybe it's nothing, but she knew better. 20 years of living in black skin had taught her that moments like this were rarely nothing. The officer reached her before she could get to her car. He stepped directly into her path, forcing her to stop. She looked up at him calmly. His name tag read Deputy Tanner. His eyes were cold. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The parking lot was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the chirping of birds in the nearby trees. Denise could feel other people watching from the store windows. She could sense their curiosity, their hesitation, their uncertainty about what was happening. She had been in war zones. She had faced enemies who wanted her dead. She had trained herself to stay calm in situations that would break most people, but standing here in this parking lot, facing this small-town deputy with his hand on his belt, she felt something she rarely felt anymore. She felt tired of having to prove her innocence before she was even accused. Tired of being watched and followed and questioned for no reason. Tired of a world that looked at her brown skin and saw a threat instead of a person. But she pushed that tiredness down. She locked it away in the same place she kept all her pain, all her frustration, all her rage, because Denise Williams was not going to give this man the satisfaction of seeing her break whatever was coming next. She would handle it the way she handled everything else, with dignity, with strength, and with the quiet knowledge that she was far more prepared for this moment than he could ever imagine. Deputy Tanner stood there with his chest puffed out and his chin tilted up like he was waiting for her to bow down or something. The sun beat down on both of them, but he didn't seem to notice. His whole focus was locked on Denise like she was the only thing in the world that mattered right now. She adjusted the grocery bags in her hands and met his stare without flinching. 12 years in the Marines had taught her how to read people. She could see the arrogance in his posture. The way he planted his feet wide apart like he was claiming territory. The slight curl at the corner of his mouth that told her he enjoyed this part of his job a little too much. "Can I help you with something, officer?" Denise asked. Her voice was calm and polite. Not submissive, but not aggressive either. Just neutral. Deputy Tanner took his time before answering. He let his eyes travel slowly from her face down to her shoes and back up again. It was meant to make her uncomfortable, to remind her who had the power in this situation, but Denise had stared down enemies who wanted to end her life. This small-town deputy with his shiny badge and bad attitude didn't even come close. "That your vehicle?" he finally asked, nodding toward her rental car. "Yes, sir, it is. You're not from around here." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "No, sir. I'm visiting family. My grandmother lives about 20 minutes outside of town." Deputy Tanner pulled a small notepad from his pocket and flipped it open, even though he didn't write anything down. It was all for show. Denise had seen this routine 100 times before. "We've been getting reports," he said slowly, drawing out each word. "Vehicle thefts in the area. Someone matching your description was spotted near a stolen car last week." Denise felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. "Someone matching your description? The oldest excuse in the book? A phrase that had been used to harass black people in this country for generations?" "I'm sorry to hear that," she said evenly. But I just arrived in town about 15 minutes ago. I've been driving since 5 o'clock this morning. And this is a rental car. I can show you the paperwork if you'd like. She started to reach for her purse, but Deputy Tanner's hand shot up. Hold it right there. Keep your hands where I can see them. Denise froze. The grocery bags hung from her wrists. Her hands were clearly visible, holding nothing but air. I was just going to get the rental agreement, she said carefully. It's in my purse, along with my driver's license. I didn't ask you to move. I asked you to keep your hands visible. She could feel eyes on them now. People were watching from the store windows. An older couple had stopped near the entrance, their faces creased with concern. A man loading groceries into his truck a few spaces away had paused mid-motion. Staring at the scene unfolding, Denise took a slow breath. She had been trained to stay calm in situations far more dangerous than this. She had been in firefights where bullets whizzed past her head. She had been ambushed by enemies who wanted her dead. She had held wounded soldiers in her arms while helicopters screamed overhead. This was nothing compared to that. But somehow, it felt worse, because in those war zones, she knew who the enemy was. She was allowed to fight back. She was trained and equipped and surrounded by people who had her back. Here, she was alone. Standing in a parking lot with grocery bags hanging from her arms, being treated like a criminal for no reason at all. Deputy Tanner took a step closer. I'm going to need you to put those bags down and place your hands on the vehicle. Excuse me? You heard me. Bags down, hands on the vehicle, now. Denise didn't move. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a citizen going about my day. You have no legal reason to detain me. Something flickered in Tanner's eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or irritation. He clearly wasn't used to people pushing back, especially not people who looked like her. Are you refusing to comply with a lawful order? His voice had gotten louder now, loud enough for everyone in the parking lot to hear. I'm asking what crime I'm suspected of committing, Denise replied, keeping her voice steady. I have a right to know why I'm being detained. Tanner's face reddened. His hand moved to the handcuffs on his belt. I'm not going to ask you again. Put the bags down and place your hands on the vehicle, or I will arrest you for obstruction. The older couple near the entrance moved closer. The woman had her phone out now, holding it up like she was recording. The man beside her looked angry, though Denise couldn't tell who his anger was directed at. More people were gathering. A mother with 2 young children stopped near the entrance. A group of teenage boys on bicycles had paused on the sidewalk. Even the cashier from inside the store had come out and was watching through the glass door. Denise felt the weight of all those eyes. She knew what this looked like. A black woman being confronted by a white officer in a small southern town. The kind of scene that ended up on the news for all the wrong reasons. She thought about her grandmother, sitting alone in her little house, waiting for her to arrive. She thought about the dinner she was supposed to cook tonight, the stories they were supposed to share, the laughter that was supposed to fill that quiet kitchen. She thought about everything she had survived to get to this moment. All the battles, all the sacrifices, all the years of service to a country that still treated her like a suspect, and something inside her shifted, not anger. Not fear? Something quieter than that? Something stronger. It was resolved. She was not going to be humiliated in this parking lot. She was not going to put her hands on that car like a criminal. She was not going to let this man with his badge and his attitude strip away her dignity just because he could. But she also wasn't going to escalate things. She wasn't going to give him any excuse to use force against her. She had seen too many stories that ended that way. She knew how quickly things could go wrong. So instead of complying, and instead of fighting, she did something else entirely. She stood perfectly still, looked Deputy Tanner directly in the eyes, and spoke loud enough for everyone watching to hear. My name is Denise Williams. I am a United States Marine Corps veteran. I have served this country for 12 years. I have 3 combat deployments. I have committed no crime. I have broken no law. I am simply trying to buy groceries for my grandmother. She paused, letting the words hang in the hot summer air. If you want to arrest me, then arrest me. But you will do it in front of all these witnesses. And you will do it knowing that I have done absolutely nothing wrong. The parking lot had gone completely silent. Even the birds seemed to have stopped chirping. Every single person in that space was watching, waiting, holding their breath. Deputy Tanner's face had gone from red to almost purple. His hand was still on his cuffs. His body was tense, coiled like a spring ready to snap, for a long moment. Nobody moved. Then Tanner took another step forward, and Denise realized with cold certainty that this was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The seconds stretched out like hours. Denise could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could feel the sweat trickling down her back. She could sense every single person in that parking lot holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Deputy Tanner's eyes had narrowed into slits. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscles twitching beneath his skin. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to someone standing up to him, someone refusing to cower, someone looking him dead in the face and telling him no, and that made him dangerous. Denise had seen this before. Not in parking lots, but in combat zones. Men who felt their authority slipping away. Men who couldn't handle being challenged. Men who would rather escalate a situation than admit they were wrong. Those men made mistakes. And those mistakes got people hurt. She kept her hands visible, her posture relaxed but ready. Every muscle in her body was prepared for whatever came next, even though she showed none of it on the surface. That was the thing about real training. It wasn't about looking tough. It was about being ready without anyone knowing you were ready. I'm going to ask you one more time, Tanner said, his voice low and tight. Put your hands on the vehicle. And I'm going to tell you one more time, Denise replied calmly. I have done nothing wrong. I will not be treated like a criminal. For a moment, she thought he might back down. She saw something flicker across his face. Hesitation, maybe. Or calculation. He glanced at the crowd that had gathered, at the phones pointed in their direction, at the witnesses who would remember every detail of this moment. But whatever thought had crossed his mind, it didn't last long. His hand shot out and grabbed her upper arm hard, his fingers dug into her flesh as he tried to spin her around toward the car. Everything after that happened in a matter of seconds. Denise felt his grip. She felt the force behind it. She felt the aggression in his movement. And something deep inside her clicked into place. Something that had been trained into her bones over 12 years of service. She didn't panic. She didn't freeze. She didn't fight back with anger or fear. She simply reacted. As Tanner tried to force her around, Denise shifted her weight and stepped to the side. It was a small movement, barely noticeable to anyone watching. But it changed everything. Instead of spinning into the car, she redirected his momentum. His own force carried him forward, off balance, before he could recover. She dropped the grocery bags and used both hands to guide his arm in the direction it was already moving. She stepped behind him, controlling his wrist, and swept her leg against the back of his knee. He went down. Not hard, not violently. But down, she followed him to the ground, keeping control of his arm, and placed her knee gently against his back. Not pressing hard, not hurting him. Just holding him in place. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds. The parking lot erupted in gasps and shouts. Someone screamed. Someone else yelled for someone to call for help. The phones that had been recording now captured a black woman in jeans and a t-shirt holding a uniformed officer on the ground. Denise could feel Tanner struggling beneath her. He was trying to push himself up, trying to twist free, but she had him in a basic compliance hold. The same hold she had taught to hundreds of young Marines. The same hold that was designed to control without causing injury. Stop moving, she said firmly. I am not hurting you. I'm holding you in a defensive restraint until backup arrives. Get off me, Tanner shouted. His face was pressed against the hot asphalt. His voice was muffled and furious. I'll have you arrested. I'll have you thrown in prison. You grabbed me first, Denise replied, her voice still calm. I have the right to defend myself. And there are at least 20 people here who just watched you assault a citizen who was cooperating peacefully. She could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had called it in? Good. She wanted more officers here. She wanted supervisors. She wanted people with authority who could sort this mess out, but she also knew how this could look. A black woman restraining a white police officer in the Deep South. It didn't matter that she was a veteran. It didn't matter that she had done nothing wrong. It didn't matter that she had acted in pure self-defense. Some people would see this footage and make up their minds before they heard a single word of explanation. She pushed that thought away. She couldn't control what people thought. She could only control what she did. And right now she was doing exactly what her training had prepared her for. Staying calm, staying in control, waiting for the situation to resolve itself properly. The crowd had grown even larger. People were coming out of the store, out of their cars, gathering in clusters to watch and whisper. An older black man in overalls stood near the entrance, shaking his head slowly. A young white woman with a baby on her hip had tears streaming down her face. A group of teenagers had stopped their bikes and were filming everything with wide eyes. This was going to be everywhere by tonight. Every news channel, every social media platform, every group chat and family dinner table in the country. Denise didn't care about any of that right now. She only cared about one thing: getting through this moment without anyone getting hurt. The sirens grew louder. 2 more patrol cars came screaming into the parking lot, lights flashing, tires screeching. Officers jumped out with their hands on their weapons, shouting commands that overlapped and contradicted each other. On the ground. Get on the ground. Let him go. Step away. Hands where I can see them. Denise didn't move. She kept her hold on Tanner and raised her voice so everyone could hear. My name is Denise Williams. I am a 12-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I served as a combat instructor specializing in hand-to-hand defense. This officer grabbed me without cause, and I defended myself using a non-harmful restraint technique. She paused, letting the words sink in. I am not resisting. I am not armed. I will release this officer the moment a supervisor arrives and I can give my statement. I am asking for this situation to be handled professionally and peacefully. The officers who had just arrived looked at each other, confusion written all over their faces. This was not what they expected to find. This was not how these situations usually went. One of them, an older man with gray at his temples, stepped forward slowly. His hand was still near his weapon, but his posture was less aggressive than the others. Ma'am, I need you to release Deputy Tanner and step away from him. Are you a supervisor? Denise asked. I'm Senior Deputy Michaels. I've been on the force for 22 years. Denise studied his face for a moment. He looked cautious but not hostile. Careful but not cruel. She made a decision. All right, she said. I'm going to release him now, slowly. I'm asking that no one approach me aggressively. I will cooperate fully, but I will not be manhandled. Are we clear? Senior Deputy Michaels gave a small nod. We're clear. Denise slowly released Tanner's arm and removed her knee from his back. She stood up calmly, took 3 steps backward, and placed her hands on top of her head without being asked. Tanner scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. He lunged toward her, finger pointing, mouth open to shout something, but before he could take 2 steps, Senior Deputy Michaels stepped in front of him and placed a firm hand on his chest. Stand down, Tanner. Right now? She assaulted me. She attacked a police officer. I said stand down. Michael's voice left no room for argument. We're going to sort this out. But you're going to do it calmly, or you're going to do it from the back of a squad car. Your choice. Tanner's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He looked around at the crowd, at the phones still recording, at his fellow officers watching with uncertain expressions, and for the first time since this whole thing started, Denise saw something new in his eyes. Fear. He was beginning to realize that this wasn't going to end the way he thought it would. That the power he had felt so confident in was slipping through his fingers like sand. Denise kept her hands on her head and her expression neutral. She had done everything right. She had stayed calm. She had defended herself without causing harm. She had made her case clearly and publicly. Now all she could do was wait and see if justice would actually be served, or if this system would protect its own the way it always had. The parking lot had turned into a circus. More patrol cars arrived. Then a news van with a satellite dish on top. Then another. People who had nothing to do with any of this were pulling off the road just to see what was happening. The crowd had tripled in size, and the air buzzed with whispers of speculation, and the clicking of phone cameras. Denise stood with her hands still on her head, watching everything unfold around her. Senior Deputy Michaels had positioned himself between her and Tanner, who was pacing back and forth near his cruiser like a caged animal. The other officers had formed a loose perimeter, keeping the crowd back while trying to figure out what exactly they were supposed to do. Nobody had put her in handcuffs yet. That was something. But nobody had told her she was free to go either. She waited. Patience was something the Marines had drilled into her from day one. Hurry up and wait, they used to say. You spend 90% of your time waiting and 10% of your time reacting. The soldiers who couldn't handle the waiting never made it through the reacting, about 15. Minutes after the backup arrived, a black SUV pulled into the lot. It wasn't a patrol vehicle. It was something more official. The crowd seemed to sense it too, because the whispers got louder and people started pointing. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She was tall, maybe mid-50s, with short gray hair and a face that looked like it had seen everything twice. She wore a tan uniform with a star pinned to her chest. The sheriff herself. Denise watched as the woman surveyed the scene. Her eyes moved slowly, taking in the crowd, the phones, the news vans, the cluster of officers standing around looking confused. Then her gaze landed on Tanner, and something flickered across her face. It wasn't surprise. It was something closer to disappointment, like she had been expecting this day to come and had hoped it wouldn't. Sheriff. Rowland walked straight past her deputies without saying a word to any of them. She stopped a few feet in front of Denise and looked her up and down. Not with suspicion or hostility, just assessment. The way a commanding officer looks at a soldier. You can put your hands down, the sheriff said. Her voice was calm and direct. Nobody's arresting you right now. Denise lowered her hands slowly, letting them rest at her sides. Thank you, ma'am. I'm Sheriff Rowland. I run this department. She glanced back at Tanner, who had stopped pacing and was watching them with a nervous expression. I'm going to need your side of this story. But first I'd like to see some identification. Of course. Denise reached slowly into her purse, making sure her movements were visible to everyone. She pulled out her wallet and handed over her driver's license. Then she reached back in and pulled out another card. Her military ID. Sheriff Rowland studied both cards for a long moment. Her eyebrows rose slightly when she saw the military credentials. She looked back up at Denise with new interest. Marine Corps, 12 years. Combat instructor. She said the words slowly, like she was putting pieces together in her mind. That explains how a woman half his size put my deputy on the ground. I didn't want to put anyone on the ground, Denise said honestly. He grabbed me. I reacted. 12 years of training doesn't just disappear because you're wearing civilian clothes. The sheriff nodded slowly. Walk me through what happened. From the beginning. So Denise told her. She started with pulling into the parking lot, the deputy watching her from his cruiser, going into the store to buy groceries, coming back out and being stopped for no reason, the accusations about matching a description, the demands to put her hands on the vehicle, the grab, the restraint. She told it all calmly and clearly, the same way she had given mission reports during her service. Facts, details, timeline, no emotion. No exaggeration, no embellishment. When she finished, Sheriff Rowland was quiet for a moment. Then she turned and called out across the parking lot. Anyone here witness what happened from the start? Hands went up. A lot of hands. The sheriff pointed to an older white woman near the front of the crowd. The same woman Denise had noticed earlier with the silver hair, the one who had been recording on her phone. "Ma'am, would you mind telling me what you saw?" The woman stepped forward. She was probably in her 70s, with a soft southern accent and a firm set to her jaw. She looked like somebody's grandmother. The kind of woman who baked pies for church fundraisers and didn't tolerate nonsense from anybody. "I saw the whole thing," she said clearly. "I was coming out of the store when that deputy over there stopped this young lady for no reason at all. She was polite. She was respectful. She didn't raise her voice or make any threatening moves. She just asked why she was being stopped." The woman pointed at Tanner, and her voice got stronger. The man got angry because she wouldn't just do whatever he said. He grabbed her arm and tried to force her against her car. That's when she defended herself. And I don't blame her one bit. If some stranger grabbed me like that, I'd want to defend myself too. A murmur ran through the crowd. Other voices started chiming in. "She's right. I saw it too. That cop was way out of line. I got the whole thing on video." The whole thing. Sheriff Rowland held up her hand and the crowd quieted down. She turned back to Denise with an expression that was hard to read. Then she looked over at Senior Deputy Michaels. "Get me those videos. Every single one you can find. I want witness statements from anyone willing to give one. And I want Deputy Tanner's body camera footage on my desk within the hour." Tanner's face went pale. "Sheriff, I can explain." She was acting suspicious. She matched a description from, what description? Sheriff Rowland cut him off. "What report?" "Because I checked our system on the way over here. And there's no report of any vehicle theft matching that car or that description anywhere in the county." Tanner opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The sheriff took a step toward him, and her voice dropped low. Low enough that only those closest could hear. But Denise was close enough. "This is the 4th complaint against you in 2 years. 4th. I've given you chance after chance because your father and the first served together for 15 years. But this?" She gestured at the crowd, the cameras, the news vans. "This is done. You're done." Tanner looked like he might cry. Or scream. Or both. His fists clenched at his sides, and for a moment Denise thought he might actually try something stupid. But then his shoulders sagged, and all the fight seemed to drain out of him. Sheriff Rowland turned back to Denise. Her expression had softened slightly. Not friendly exactly, but respectful. "Miss Williams, I apologize for what happened here today. It was wrong. It shouldn't have happened. And I promise you, there will be consequences." Denise nodded slowly. She had heard promises like that before. From commanding officers. From politicians. From people who meant well, but couldn't change a system that had been broken for generations. But something about the way Sheriff Rowland said it made her think this might be different. Maybe. "Thank you," Denise said simply. "I just want to go see my grandmother. That's all I came here to do." The sheriff actually smiled at that. A small, tired smile. "Then go. You're free to leave whenever you want. If we need anything else from you, we'll be in touch. But as far as I'm concerned, you did nothing wrong today. Nothing at all." Denise bent down and picked up her grocery bags from where they had fallen on the hot asphalt. The eggs were probably broken. The bread was probably squished. But that didn't matter right now. She walked to her rental car, put the bags in the back seat, and climbed behind the wheel. Her hands were shaking slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. The adrenaline that had been holding her together was starting to fade, and everything she had been pushing down was beginning to rise up, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove toward her grandmother's house. The news vans tried to follow her for a few blocks, but she lost them on the winding country roads. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the familiar gravel driveway. The little white house with the blue shutters. The porch swing where she had spent countless summer evenings. The garden full of tomatoes and sunflowers that her grandmother tended like children. The front door opened before she even got out of the car. And there was Grandma Lucille standing on the porch with her hands on her hips and a look of pure love on her face. "Child, what took you so long?" "I've been waiting all morning." Denise got out of the car, walked up the porch steps. and fell into her grandmother's arms, and finally she let herself cry. Denise spent 3 days at her grandmother's house before the world caught up with her. 3 days of home-cooked meals, long conversations on the porch swing, and peaceful mornings watching the sun rise over the cotton fields. 3 days of pretending that everything was normal, even though her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She had turned off notifications after the first night. She wasn't ready to face what was waiting for her out there. She just wanted to be a granddaughter for a little while longer, but on the 4th morning, Grandma Lucille sat down across from her at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and a look that said it was time to talk. "Baby, I know you're hiding from something," the old woman said gently, "and I know you need your rest. But there's a whole lot of people out there who want to hear your story. Maybe it's time you let them." Denise wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup and stared into the dark liquid. "I didn't ask for any of this, Grandma. I just wanted to buy groceries." "I know, sweetheart. But sometimes life puts you in situations you didn't choose. And sometimes those situations turn into something bigger than yourself." Grandma Lucille reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You handled yourself with dignity, with strength, with grace. That's nothing to hide from. That's something to be proud of." Denise looked up at her grandmother's face. The wrinkles around her eyes, the gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, the wisdom of 82 years shining through like sunlight through old glass. This woman had lived through things Denise could barely imagine: segregation, civil rights marches, decades of fighting for respect in a world that didn't want to give it. And she had done it all with the same quiet strength that Denise had tried to carry with her into that parking lot. "Okay," Denise said softly. "I'll look." She turned her phone back on and waited for it to load. Within seconds, the notifications started flooding in. Hundreds of them, thousands missed calls. Text messages, emails, social media tags, news requests. The videos from the parking lot had gone everywhere. Every major news network had picked up the story. Every social media platform was talking about it. Her name was trending. Her face was on screens all across the country. She scrolled through some of the headlines. Marine veteran restrains. Officer during traffic stop. Combat instructor takes down deputy in viral. Confrontation. Black woman stands her ground against aggressive cop. Some of the coverage was fair. Some of it was sensationalized. Some of it twisted the facts to fit whatever narrative the outlet wanted to push. That was the nature of news these days. Everyone had an angle, but underneath all the noise, there was something else. Something that surprised her. Support. Thousands upon thousands of messages from people she had never met. Veterans thanking her for representing them with honor. Black women telling her she had given them hope. Parents saying they wanted their daughters to grow up to be like her. Strangers from all over the world sending words of encouragement and gratitude. Denise felt tears prick at her eyes as she read through some of them. She had spent so many years feeling invisible, feeling like her service didn't matter, feeling like no matter how hard she worked or how much she sacrificed, she would always be seen as less than. And now, here were all these people telling her that she mattered, that her story mattered, that what she did in that parking lot had meant something to them. It was almost too much to take in. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Sheriff Rowland held a press conference announcing that Deputy Tanner had been suspended pending a full investigation. The body camera footage confirmed everything Denise had said. He had grabbed her without provocation. He had escalated a routine encounter into a confrontation. He had lied about the vehicle theft report. 2 months later, he was officially terminated from the department, but the story didn't end there. The investigation uncovered a pattern of behavior that went back years. Multiple complaints from Black and brown residents about harassment, intimidation, and false accusations. All of them had been ignored or dismissed. All of them had been swept under the rug by a system that protected its own. Until now. Sheriff Rowland announced a complete overhaul of the department's policies. Mandatory bias training. New procedures for traffic stops and civilian encounters. A civilian review board to investigate complaints. Real accountability for officers who abused their power. Some people said it wasn't enough. That the changes were just for show? That nothing would really change in the long run. Maybe they were right. Denise had been around long enough to know that systems didn't change overnight. That progress was slow and painful and often took 2 steps back for every step forward, but she also knew that change had to start somewhere. And if her story could be part of that start, then maybe everything she went through had been worth something. The interview requests kept coming. News programs, podcasts, documentary filmmakers. Everyone wanted to hear her story. Everyone wanted to put her face on their platform. She said no to most of them. She wasn't interested in being famous. She wasn't interested in becoming a symbol or a spokesperson or a brand, but she did say yes to a few. The ones that seemed genuine. The ones that wanted to have real conversations about policing, about race, about what it meant to serve a country that didn't always serve you back. She talked about her time in the Marines, about the pride she felt wearing the uniform, about the brothers and sisters she had served alongside, people of every color and background, united by a common purpose. She talked about what it felt like to come home and be treated like a threat. To have all that service and sacrifice mean nothing to someone who only saw the color of her skin. She talked about the need for change. Not just in police departments, but in communities, in schools, in hearts and minds. She talked about the importance of standing up for yourself while also extending grace to others. She talked about dignity and strength and the power of staying calm when everything inside you wants to explode. And people listened. Not everyone agreed with her. Not everyone liked what she had to say. Some people called her a hero. Others called her much worse. That was the nature of putting yourself out there. You couldn't control how people received you. You could only control who you chose to be. 6 months after that day in the parking lot, Denise finally went back to Ridley. She hadn't planned to. But Grandma Lucille's birthday was coming up, and there was no way she was missing it. She pulled into the same grocery store parking lot, the same spot near the back, the same hot Georgia sun beaten down on the asphalt, but this time, something was different. A young black girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, was walking out of the store with her mother. When she saw Denise getting out of her car, she stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth fell open. "Mama, that's her!" "That's the lady from the video." The mother looked up and recognized Denise too. She smiled, a warm and knowing smile, and gently nudged her daughter forward. The little girl walked up to Denise with something between shyness and awe. She was wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon superhero on it. Her hair was done up in 2 perfect puffs on either side of her head. "Are you really a Marine?" she asked in a small voice. Denise knelt down so they were eye to eye. "I really am. 12 years. My mama said you're brave. She said you stood up for yourself when it was hard." Denise felt her heart squeeze in her chest. "I just did what I thought was right. That's all any of us can do." The little girl thought about that for a moment. Then she smiled, bright and wide and full of hope. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." Denise reached out and gently touched the girl's shoulder. "You already are, sweetheart. You already are." She watched the mother and daughter walk to their car, hand in hand. She watched them drive away, waving through the window, and standing there in that parking lot where everything had changed, Denise Williams finally understood why it had all happened. Not for fame, not for attention, not for any kind of personal glory, but for that little girl. And all the little girls like her, so they could grow up knowing that their dignity was worth fighting for, that their voices deserved to be heard, that no matter what the world threw at them, they had the strength to stand tall. That was worth everything. That was worth it all.